Germany has a new chancellor. Today, members of parliament elected the conservative Friedrich Merz to lead the country's new government, a history-making moment in German politics that many would argue happened for all the wrong reasons. In what would become the first round of voting, Merz came up too short. It took a second round of voting to give him the win, an unprecedented moment in German political history. And the saying goes, if you don't succeed at first, try again. That may have worked to become chancellor. Will it work governing Germany? We begin the day with the nail-biting drama and history-making moments that gave Germany a new leader. Today, lawmakers in the German parliament elected the conservative Friedrich Merz to become the country's new chancellor, leading a coalition government with the center-left Social Democrats. Now, what was expected to go smoothly did not. For the first time in post-war Germany, the chancellor candidate failed to get enough votes to win, so it took an unprecedented second round of voting. Merz's shock defeat in the first round, we assume, was possible because members of his own coalition failed to support him, lawmakers who should have been on his side. Though he finally got the majority he needed, it's not the commanding start that Merz was hoping for. And at a time when Germany and Europe require strong leadership, it is a weakened Merz who starts his term today. Well, to walk us through what happened today, I'm joined by our political correspondent, Simon Young. Simon, you were following events for us. It was supposed to be a formality, but it turned out to be a calamity. Why?
Well, a day of huge drama in the Bundestag, Brent. Basically, Friedrich Merz got up this morning hoping that it would be plain sailing, smooth start, as you said, voted through in the first round and applause, and straight off to the presidential palace to get his certificate and become chancellor. Well, it didn't happen like that. He had just too few votes, 16 too few for that in that first round, or was it 18? There were just a few people who didn't want to give their vote away quite that easily.
Do we know who those people were?
Well, that is a question that people are still looking into, delving into tonight, phoning around, trying to find that out. I mean, the big relief for Friedrich Merz is that in the end, in the second round, those people were persuaded, perhaps the thumbscrews were applied by the party managers, and they got it back on track. He got elected in the end, but he has his detractors, there's no doubt. Those in the Social Democrat Party particularly didn't like the fact that just a short couple of months ago, Friedrich Merz put a motion through the parliament with the support, essentially, of the far-right AfD. That was something that a lot of people have said was a bad misstep and really left a bad taste in mouths. And even within his own conservative bloc, there are many who say Friedrich Merz is too temperamental, he's too capricious, he's not really the right man to be chancellor. So, in a way you could say, well, in the end, he got there, and that is has to be good enough for him.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the coverage, and I mean, it was palpable. You could see the shock on people's faces when he didn't get enough votes in that first round. But it was a foregone conclusion that he had to win, right?
Well, the way the system works, there are two rounds, and then in the final round, he just needs a very simple majority. So it's almost inviting those who want to sort of register a little bit of opposition in the background. Mm-hmm. I think that perhaps some of the people who voted against him in this first round thought that it wouldn't actually prevent him from being elected straight away. So they thought they were just, raising a little shadow. And in fact, it went further than it backfired, if you like. It went much further. It caused a political storm for a short while, for a few hours. People were asking themselves, will Friedrich Merz even become Chancellor of Germany? And that was a big shock.
And if someone was trying to throw a little bit of shade today that went too far, what does that tell us, though, about the stability of this government that he's now leading?
Well, I think it's always clear that it's going to be a difficult ride. These are two different political blocs, essentially centre-right and centre-left, trying to work together, trying to solve some big problems on the economy, on migration, and all the problems around the world that Germany is also involved in. There's a wafer-thin majority in Parliament. So Friedrich Merz is always going to have to keep going back to his coalition partners and his own people and saying, look, we need to concentrate minds, we need to show compromise, we need to rally around the government policies. The question really is he the man to do that? Because temperamentally, he can be a little bit, off on his own and in his own world.
How would you gauge then, before we run out of time, how would you gauge national sentiment today? Now, after having seen what happened today, moving forward?
Well, I think people said this was a false start, absolutely clear. The seeds of discontent have already been sown within the government ranks as a result of today. Yes, they've come round, they've got the smiles in the end, and they can get on with the serious work, even starting tonight at the first cabinet meeting. But I think it remains to be seen whether these are two parties that can really come together and work in the national interest.
I think there are going to be plenty of reasons for us to talk again in the future, Simon. As always, good to have you in the studio. Thank you. And for more now, I want to cross over to our correspondent, Rosie Birchard. She is in Brussels covering the European angle of this story. Rosie, Europe is expecting a competent leader who will strengthen the EU as well as NATO. Have today's events, have they made people maybe think twice or raise some eyebrows?
They've definitely raised some eyebrows, and Brent, I can tell you, they also raised heart rates. By later in the day, diplomats were telling me, this is just more of a hiccup rather than an earthquake, but earlier on in those hours where it was uncertain whether Merz would jump that hurdle, diplomats were saying that, in fact, that this was something that was really bad for Europe, that this was a mess. And why? That's because Germany is such an important player in the European Union. It's the player, it's the political heavyweight. And without a strong Germany, it's hard for the European Union to move forward. The complaint we've heard from diplomats here in Brussels over the last years about the former coalition in Germany was that they simply couldn't get their act together, and that led to some flip-flopping on different EU policies like the future of the combustion engine or whether to impose tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Brussels now wants more stability from Germany. That being said, it's clearly an embarrassing first day for Friedrich Merz, not exactly how he would have liked to start. That makes day 2 and 3 even more important.
Chancellor Merz, we understand, will be visiting the French President Emmanuel Macron tomorrow in Paris. What can we expect there?
Expect plenty of talk of what they will call the Franco-German engine. That's the idea that these two big political powers in Germany, this power couple, are the driving forces for change within the European Union. And now, while Friedrich Merz's predecessor, Olaf Scholz, was in that very awkward transition period before Merz managed to finally make it into office, Emmanuel Macron's really been out in the front when it comes to issues like foreign policy. And so I think we're going to be really looking at the kind of chemistry between President Emmanuel Macron and his new counterpart to see whether this really will be a happy family moving forward, which could strengthen the European Union, or more of a collision course.
We know that Merz has promised to make Europe a priority. What does that mean? I mean, how does he want Europe to change?
So he's laid out a few of his key priorities. First of all, on migration. He wants to radically, he says, drastically reduce the number of irregular migrants coming into Germany from, it should be said, from other European Union countries. That's in line with the trend we're seeing across the bloc in general. Then there's the issue of deregulation. He wants to cut red tape. He says, while keeping Europe's big climate promises in place. Now, if you're a business, that might sound like welcome news, but if you're a climate campaigner, that's definitely going to raise some scepticism. And then on defence, Merz has said he wants to boost European defences. Of course, that's even more important with regards to the demands of the Trump administration. And lastly, I'd highlight free trade. Merz says he really wants to push the European Union to go out there and seek new trading partners. And some of those on the EU's list for future include the Philippines, India and Indonesia.
All right, GW correspondent Rosie Birchard with the latest from Brussels tonight. Rosie, as always, thank you. Well, it hasn't been the best start for the new German chancellor. Let's take a closer look now at Friedrich Merz, the leader tasked with bringing political stability to Germany after months of political limbo since the collapse of the previous coalition government last November.
Friedrich Merz sees himself as the man who can fix Germany and Europe. The politician turned top finance executive turned politician again is known for his CEO take on politics. Germany, he says, has to improve its performance on the world stage.
I know that many of you expect more German leadership than we have seen in the last years.
Germany, he vows, will no longer be out of the picture, like at the impromptu peace talks on Ukraine during the funeral for Pope Francis. And Merz has a ready answer for an America threatening to turn its back on Europe.
Someone from where you're standing right now, what is your message to Donald Trump?
The key message to Donald Trump is Germany is back on track. Germany will fulfill the obligations in terms of defense, and Germany is willing to strengthen their own competitiveness. And that is not just Germany, that is Europe.
Just days ago, Merz doubled down on his resolve that Europe cannot afford to give in over Ukraine, a war he sees as a battle for democratic values.
Wir sind nicht Kriegspartei.
We are not party to this war, and we do not want to become that. But neither are we unaffected bystanders or intermediaries.
Zwischen den Fronten.
Tying Germany's fate even closer to embattled Ukraine could prove a tough sell at home. The stakes are high, and Merz, who spent more than a decade in business, is beaming with confidence. He says he can turn Germany's flat economy around, and he promises a radical change on migration.
Ich werde im Fall meiner Wahl zum Bundeskanzler der Bundesrepublik Deutschland
I will instruct the Federal Ministry of the Interior, using the Chancellor's authority to issue directives, to permanently control all Germany's national borders with its neighbours.
die deutschen Staatsgrenzen zu allen unseren Nachbarn dauerhaft zu kontrollieren.
Whether he can deliver on any of these pledges will also depend on whether he's able to find compromise with his coalition partner, the Social Democrat SPD. Compromise is not the forte of the man who only recently clashed with former Chancellor Angela Merkel over his decision to accept votes from the far-right AfD to pass a migration motion. Thousands took to the streets protesting Merz's move. He found himself on the back foot, repeating his firewall pledge over and over again.
Wir werden mit der
We will not cooperate with the party that calls itself the Alternative for Germany.
nicht zusammenarbeiten.
Many in his own political camp feel the disappointing election result of 28.5% for the conservative CDU-CSU was caused by Merz's flirt with the far-right AfD. While his manoeuvre remained unpopular, his determination to act on migration struck a chord, and it underlined how Friedrich Merz is in many ways the opposite of Angela Merkel. Their parallel rise to the top of the conservative CDU party in the 90s and early 2000s turned into a political feud when Merkel beat him to become parliamentary party leader. Frustrated, Merz left politics altogether and made his fortune as a lawyer and board member for the American investment giant BlackRock. A CV Merz sees as an asset, while his critics fault him for his lack of experience in government. The incoming leader of Europe's largest economy faces the enormous task of reigniting the German economy and stabilizing Europe. Huge expectations that will put Merz to the test from day one.
And to talk more about this historic day in the German parliament, I'm joined here at the big table by Olaf Böhnke. He's the Berlin director at the Alliance of Democracies Foundation. He's also at the political consultancy Rasmussen Global. He's also worked in the Bundestag. Olaf, it's good to have you back on the program. Let me ask you, 6 months from now, will the events of today, will they even matter?
I think, sorry, it was a historic stumble, but I think hopefully will not leave major scars. So I think from a voter's perspective, I think people will forget. Citizens will not care in 6 months. But this was really an important reminder for the new cabinet members and including all members of this new coalition that it matters from day one how you behave. So the reason why Olaf Scholz struggled was that the inner discipline of the coalition was fading at the end.
Yeah.
So everyone thought, I can do whatever I want, so only party interests matter. But the collective, so you need to be a team player these days.
Well, we heard my colleague Simon Young saying that Merz is seen somewhat as a CEO running a business, now running a country. And we hear a lot of business leaders in Germany saying that we need someone like that to lead the country now. Do you agree? Is that what we need? I mean, does he have the business acumen to deal with the economic challenges?
I think so. He brings some boardroom realism into the cabinet, and that's a good thing. So this is also, I think, why many people in the German business and corporate community were happy to see a CEO coming in, so becoming the new digital minister, that Katharina Reiche will be the new minister for economic affairs, so with 10 years of also experience as a CEO. So I think that kind of business attitude will be a very important element.
And yet his popularity numbers are rather poor. How do you explain that?
Yeah, so he has two sides. So the one is, so he can give excellent speeches and can be really convincing, but he also has this impulse control issue. And the thing is, so he's not from the first moment a people's person, so who gets you. So I think he needs to convince Germans by delivering results. This is also, I think, his main recipe to fight against the AfD, which will be his core nemesis for
That's
4 years.
the biggest opposition group in Parliament now, the AfD. I mean, I heard some people describing what happened today, that the AfD, that they were licking their chops, looking at this and thinking that they could smell blood.
Yeah, and they did. So they made this toxic offer by saying, okay, so we will vote in favor actually for shortening the period so that we can have a second vote today. But at the same time, the co-chair, Ms. Weidel, actually called immediately for him to withdraw, say, okay, your career is done. And so this is a very toxic situation.
Is this going to be the biggest headache for his time in power, is the fact that the AfD wants him to fail?
Absolutely. Not the AfD only, but they will be the ones with the most aggressive attitude. And as you said, so the moment they smell blood, actually, they go after it. And the thing is that, so one of their previous leaders, he had said, if Germany is doing bad, the AfD is doing well. So therefore, this is also a reminder that, okay, so their core interest is to see the level of frustration and anger rising. Mm-hmm. So, and this is the thing Merz needs to fight against.
And tomorrow he's going to go to Paris. He's going to be in Warsaw, France and Poland. Very important for Germany. What do you see in Friedrich Merz in terms of being a statesman, but also in terms of foreign policy? Because so much that he will have to lead will be a result of what's happening outside of this country.
Yeah, no, Europe is, so I think Europe was watching what happened this morning, and so therefore you could feel that the 6 months actually of German absence on the international stage were a real big loss for everyone. So therefore he is by nature someone who's very interested in foreign policy, so therefore I think he will have a very strong European commitment for stronger European cooperation, particularly with the countries you mentioned, France and Poland.
You think the French President Emmanuel Macron is going to I guess, would the chemistry be better with these two than it was with Macron and Scholz?
Yeah, just by the fact Friedrich Merz also used to be a good French speaker, so therefore he also, I think we will see a speech by Merz quite soon in the French Parliament, actually in French.
Well, Merz also is a good English speaker, but is that going to help or hurt him with Donald Trump?
So he's a transatlanticist by heart, so therefore I think he will definitely try in a cautious way to keep the cooperative momentum, but I think he's fully aware of what happened. So the one of the reasons why he broke his core campaign promise not to go for more debt and more investment was the fear that the US support for Europe and for Germany will fade away. So therefore I think he's fully aware of the danger coming from Washington towards Europe, and he will prepare by more European unity. But on the other hand, I think he's also fully convinced that without the US, Europe is never actually in the same position.
And that ties in to what's going to happen with Ukraine. And we were looking at social media today. The Ukrainian President Zelensky, he was the first political leader to congratulate Friedrich Merz when he became chancellor. Merz is committed to defending or in helping Ukraine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So he said so from the very beginning. So there's a lot of confidence in Kiev. The big question everyone will look for is, will he deliver Taurus missiles, yes or no?
Right.
So my bet is he will. Because he made that kind of indirect promise already.
Despite the fact that we've heard from the Kremlin that would be considered the NATO, the West getting involved in the war.
The Kremlin works like the AfD works. So fear and frustration actually is their everyday fuel. So therefore, of course, they are trying to play with the anger and with the anxiety of Germans that the Russians might strike back nuclear. So I don't think so. And Merz it's quite a good strategist. So therefore, I think he will do this in a European context together with France and the UK. He already asked for their support and their agreement, and Keir Starmer immediately said, okay, we are fine. So Storm Shadows and Taurus are very similar weapons. So therefore, I think at some point he will.
Any possibility that this government will not succeed, that we will have early elections the way we just had in February? I mean, looking to the future, or are all bets on this will be a success?
I mean, today was exactly the kind of the view in the crystal ball. So of course, no one had expected something like this happening today. So therefore, the bloody nose, the new coalition, and the new cabinet actually got from this start, I think might serve as a good reminder why the previous coalition of Olaf Scholz failed. So. Discipline actually is the one thing, and it's about teamwork. So for the leader as well as for the team.
Yeah, bloody nose, that's a good way to remember what happened today. Olaf Böhnke, Olaf, it's always good to have you in the studio. Thank you.
Thank you.